What's going on, everybody? This is Ian Elliott-Carter of The Controversy, and I have a special guest today. Well, he's not really a guest. He's definitely not special. I'm just kidding. He's a very special guy. But family to the show, Jeremy Branch of Movies Are Terrible and People Are Terrible. Welcome to the show, brother.
Glad to be here.
So I got a couple questions for you, man. First question, man. Do you like living here on planet Earth?
I mean, I don't have much of a choice in the option, I guess. Yeah, it's all right. It's got its pros and cons. The population, I guess, does continue to become more and more of a problem. But I got a nice little 2-bedroom apartment over here. We're living large.
So Earth is home by default. You don't really have other options.
Correct.
I see. Okay, cool. My second question to you is, do you enjoy sex?
Are you propositioning me?
I'm not. No. Mine
Well, then
is
no, I'm good.
Okay. Well, if you don't enjoy sex because old men do less of that,
Leave my erectile dysfunction out of this.
a lot of people on this planet like to reproduce.
It's true.
As of 2019, it says that the world population clock is 7.7 billion people. Now, that is a huge number.
It's a big ass number.
That's a big ass number, and it's definitely climbing because the original thing I looked at an article, and it was from the population numbers of 2015, which it was at 7 billion. 7.3 billion, I believe it was. So yeah, the numbers are climbing by the day. Between 3 and 7, that's a 4-point difference. Huge difference when you're talking billions. So eventually we are going to. It's climbing to overpopulation right now. We still got a lot of room. I guess it's not overpopulated at this time, but if it's climbing, man, we're gonna run out of room. So my question to you and other people in the comments section. What is your solution to overpopulation in the future for our children, grandchildren, great-greats, and so forth? You got any ideas?
Well, I know he's kind of a controversial figure, but Adolf Hitler had some really great ideas about eugenics. No, when you start talking about controlling the population, it gets a little tricky.
Let me rephrase the question. Any population ideas that do not have anything to do with Hitler or burning or killing?
No, it's valid though that because of how many people there are, how many resources there are, how many square miles and footage there are. So you're left with a couple options. If we're taking killing people off the table, which I guess for the sake of this exercise is fine, we can either move to space or we can move to underwater. I am a pretty big, there's also the idea of just building upward, upward mobility, like, I guess that's not the proper word, but like in cities, like in Asia, they do a lot of like stacking condos and stuff on top of each other,
I think that's actually a great idea, but I'll take it a step further. Remember the Jetsons, as cartoonish as that was, it didn't seem like that bad of an idea of how they built the cities. And I think that would reduce a lot of burglary and stealing and stuff like that. Because who's going to want to climb that big ass thing to steal a watch?
That's a really good point. People in America in particular, we like yards, and yards take up a whole lot of space. Parking lots and yards are taking up lots of good real estate. So I do believe and not even just building upward, we could build downward. We could dig holes and continue to kind of build out that way. That said, if space isn't an immediate concern, resources are going to continue to be an issue because agriculture, for example, we talk about parking lots, we talk about lawns taking up a lot of space. Agricultural land for farming, for cattle, all of that kind of stuff takes up huge amounts of land as well. And as we continue to produce more people, we're going to continue to need to produce more crops, more food, things like that. So it eventually is going to be a problem of where do you put all of that stuff.
Absolutely.
Trump is insane, but his idea about going to Mars, I've always thought that sounded like a cool idea.
Dude, as soon as he said that, I was just like, yes, that is a very progressive thought. That's unlike you. But then when he said the moon was part of Mars, that's when he lost me.
Oh, I didn't catch that part.
Look it up. He's, I don't know, doesn't surprise me any.
No.
But like you said, there's other things that we could talk about. You mentioned underwater living, and then you said space living, like Star Trek, Star Wars, and all that stuff. That has different pros and cons. You mentioned the agriculture side. I think also waste. Like a lot. We're polluting our waters right now.
Yeah.
And if we're living under the water, it seems like it could possibly get worse.
It would have to. Think? Yeah, it would have
to. How would you deal with waste in space as well? I guess maybe burning it, sending it to the sun like they did in Futurama, but I don't know.
See, that's my thing about space is when you're in space, the laws of physics don't apply, right? So on Earth, we've got the law of inertia. An object will stay in motion unless an outside force acts upon it,
right,
to slow it down. That's Newton's law of inertia, I think. So in space, if we just pull back a slingshot and we let that rock go towards the sun, nothing's ever going to slow it down. There is no resistance. It will continue on that path until it hits the destination. So we could literally take trash balls and just launch them shits straight into the sun the way they did on Futurama. I don't see why that wouldn't work.
They would dissolve before they even got to the sun. I don't know how close. The closer they get, the closer they're gonna melt. We melt here on the planet. So, one thing I wanted to know what's your opinion on when it came to underwater, because we're going to talk about other situations. The underwater situation seems like it could be very dangerous, but it seems like it's safer than the space situation, especially if we're going to maybe recolonize a planet, because if anything goes wrong underwater, we can just go up and get out of there. If anything goes wrong in space, it's game over.
It's a very good point.
We're talking about breathing. We're talking about disease and shit like that. Underwater, our biggest thing is the pressure, the water flooding, and possibly sea creatures we've never seen before. But how would you even build a civilization underwater too? Don't we need domes and big ass hammers?
Before this conversation gets too far away from me, I am in no way crediting Donald Trump with the idea about colonizing Mars. That is an old school idea. Both of us know it. I just shouldn't have said it. It came out of my mouth when I heard him say it. I was like, people act like that shit's crazy, but it's not a bad idea. People have been talking about it for a while. And the main reason why is because of its actual location, distance from the sun,
and it's habitable. It's habitable.
Yeah. Right. And we're on Earth already. I like the idea of going underwater. I feel like the same problems are inherent in both. Basically, if you are in a bubble, if you're in a dome and you're in space and something busts the thing, then all the pressure gets sucked out. You're sucked into the vacuum of space. If you're underwater, all of the water comes rushing into this thing. It's the displacement of oxygen. It's going to fucking wreak havoc because we need oxygen to survive.
Absolutely.
The ocean doesn't have it. I mean, it does, but we can't filter it. We don't have gills. And then space doesn't have it. So we're talking about having to, what do they call it? What do they call it? When you build a fake atmosphere for something, terraform it. Yeah, we're going to have to terraform it ourselves. And I can see
seems like it's a lot cheaper. One seems like it's a lot cheaper than the other too. It seems like the cost of living underwater would be half the price of living in space or having another planet. So if we're talking about that,
yeah, it's a good point.
And I'm not even just trying to lean toward living underwater, because I would probably choose space just because of curiosity. But I was just looking at the reality of the situation. It seems like it'd be cheaper, and it's, in my opinion, still seems like it'd be safer. But you are right though. It seems like the situation would be deadly regardless, but it seems like you could escape a little bit. Your survival is a little bit easier with living underwater, because you have the surface is just up.
Less of a distance to go to get back to normalcy.
That's what I was trying to say. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I get it. And that's actually a good point. I think because of that and taking that into consideration, I feel like with us watching season 3 of Stranger Things and us coming out recently, the idea of creating levels of Earth
Right.
underneath the actual surface, there's something to that. Like, we wouldn't actually have to go underwater or build a false ecosystem when, like, we could just remove ground, build like cities underneath the earth. But the thing is, I think what our problem is that's put us in this situation is there's only so much space on Earth, where space itself is infinite. So if we're going to grow outward, I would just think, like, just rip off the fucking Band-Aid, get out there, start doing it. You know, colonization of I think first, I don't know, man, do you start on the moon or do you start on Mars if we were going to go that way?
I think we should go to Mars, and absolutely what you said about traveling under tunnels too, like that. I think that might trigger possibly maybe volcanoes and stuff like that,
Right.
depending on what
We
we're
don't
thinking and
know.
stuff.
Yeah.
We don't know, but yeah, exactly. We never know until we just take the plunge. So I would choose Mars over the moon because of just of how similarities of it is to Earth when it comes to mountains and all that stuff. It seems like the moon is just trash. It's just boring. I don't know. I would prefer Mars.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure a lot of the people that are checking this out right now, they know there's polar ice caps on Mars. Mars could have potentially had flowing water at some time eons ago, or maybe not so long ago. We don't exactly know, but what we do know is there's evidence of water flowing. There's literally riverbeds and stuff that we see over Mars. Mars is a sister planet to Earth. They're very, very similar in size and distance from space. I think that if we were going to try to colonize another planet, but then it's like, we look at the long term of that. And when I say long term, I'm not talking about a generation or 2 generations, maybe a million years. How much longer before we're just going and colonizing other planets, destroying them of their natural resources, and then just on to the next one? You know what I mean?
Dude, when is the right time? I just don't understand. We made it to the moon. Like, I don't understand. I understand we're still living in a time we're still trying to figure things out. It's like a transitional period. But whenever we got the resources, man, I don't understand what would be holding us back. It obviously would just be fear.
Yeah. And, on a more pragmatic level, like, if everybody stopped eating red meat, I don't know what that would immediately do to the economy. I don't know what it would do to the population of cattle, because most cattle are born for the specific purpose of being slaughtered. But if we could allocate the land that we were using for things that may or may not be all that important and replace them with things that were more like ecologically more responsible, then there's a lot more space on Earth than we give it credit for.
Sure.
We would just have to change our way of living. Like, all of the fucking parking lots in America, public transportation,
a lot of space.
Not really a big thing here. It's like we like our big cars. We like having our own means of transportation. We don't want to share the fucking commute with somebody else if we don't have to. It's very American, and that that sense of what it means to, like, what the human experience is, it really does mean that we need way more space than we actually need. So I mean, there's contextualizing what we're using land for, I think could change dramatically and buy us another couple hundred years.
Yeah, and that's the problem with us sometimes. We think in the now, we don't think in the future, and it sucks sometimes. Like, I understand what the now is. We got a lot of situations. We got to handle our bills. We got to deal with our personal issues. But, like, at the end of the day, man, this Earth is on lease, and we got to give it to somebody else later on in life. I wanted to bring up 2 other things. We talked about possibly stacking up like they do in China, or like the big skyscraper thing like they do in the Jetsons. We talked about underwater living. We talked about possibly space living, whether it be on a ship or habiting another planet. Have you ever heard of floating cities?
No.
So a floating city is the concept where they have, like, it's like a boat, like big ass boats, I guess, what the hovering of a boat where it floats, and it just sits on the water, and they're floating all over the Atlantic or the Pacific. First thing that comes to mind, possibly the dangers of national disasters like a tsunami or a hurricane. But I like some of these. If you Google floating city, some of these concepts they have like these huts or these little skyscrapers just hovering or just floating on the water. And some of them are dome shaped, some of them are skyscraper shaped. I think it's a great concept, but like I said, the obvious of the dangers, we have to find out a way to quickly evacuate if there's a hurricane or a tsunami, because those are very unpredictable, especially when they become categorized. But what do you think about that concept, living on the water, floating on the water?
It's fascinating.
There's a lot of space, like you said, on this planet, and a lot of our space comes with water.
The first thing that your head goes to is this idea of like, oh my God, what if a rogue tsunami came in? But like, we run that same risk on land. It could be earthquakes. It could be volcanoes, all of these things. I do know, like I saw just the other day, like a 1,200-foot tsunami that's just constantly going in the ocean. Wouldn't want to build it around that thing, obviously, but there seems like a lot of like chill places where you could absolutely do something like that. I think it's a great idea.
I just thought about it too. Like, if they're floating, it's not like, and you said that we're making it in a certain area. If they're floating, possibly we could put engines on these things. Like, if we hear about a tsunami coming in the Pacific, let's just move it to the Gulf. Yeah. Just move it up north. I didn't even think about that. So you just said that too.
Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting. I think that there's, what is it? 78% of the earth is covered in water. Maybe it's more than that. I don't exactly know my numbers.
A lot of open land right there that we were just talking about right there.
For sure.
That could possibly be a thing. And I wanted to bring one thing up too, because that was one of the concepts I looked at, and I was just like, the only con to that honestly would be the weather, but we can move it, I guess, if we had the power, which all that power that we would put in a spaceship could go to that, and it might be less of a cost. My other idea that I've seen is an actual floating city. Now, not on the water, but like above land, like a spaceship, but on Earth, or just a regular ship, like a cruise line, but floating. If that makes any sense.
No, it does, for sure.
So obviously that's technology we don't have at this time. That huge ass spaceship, the size of a continent, floating around. Now, I think it would be possibly safe, I guess, if when we're talking about weather, we can just, like I said, move from time to time, but that would take a lot of gas and a lot of power. And and if that thing like crashes and hits the planet, it'd be possibly like a meteor. So there's a lot of pros and cons to that. What do you think about that?
Is it Coruscant? Is that the floating city on Star Wars where Lando's from? Coruscant?
Oh, Cloud City?
Yeah.
Oh, what? Okay, yeah, I get what you're saying. I thought that was more of a Jetsons concept where everything's just like, just straight up like that. I didn't know it floated. That's weird.
That is it's the technology itself that I have a hard time wrapping my head around. Like magnets of some kind, I guess. I don't know, because otherwise you'd have to be burning some sort of fucking fuel, maybe solar. I don't know. I could only
have a hell of a lot of fuel, like, and just picturing a city just landing on the land for gas and then going back up. It'd be really weird to look at.
It is. I mean, it's like where we're at right now. I think we are more likely to be able to go and colonize Mars. Like, we have all of that technology. We could build a biodome. Like, I remember the Pauly Shore movie. Like, we literally could do that. Like, just put a big ass bubble over it and start to terraform it. And once you start to create plants that breathe fucking carbon dioxide, they start putting off oxygen. All of a sudden, you get this oxygen-rich environment. Things start to go good almost immediately. And I see that, like, the idea of the floating cities, that to me sounds, and of all of these crazy far out things that we're talking about, that seems the most in the realm of science fiction. All of these other things are almost like, if we had the money, if we had the fucking budget to do it, we could pretty much make it happen. I think a lot of the reasons why so many of these advancements haven't already taken place is because there's somebody lobbying to prevent that shit from happening. Like, there's this documentary that came out 20 years ago called Who Killed the Electric Car, right? And the electric car was invented back in the 1970s, but nobody was even able to get one on the market until like the late 1990s, early 2000s. And it's because people in power, they tend to want to keep it. People with money tend to not want to give it up. And once they start realizing, like, oh God, we can power cars off of the sun. You can't tax people on the sun, can you? Well, we've got all these fossil fuels that we have access to that other people don't have access to, and like there's all this currency and like that's the most valuable shit in the world because we're told that it's valuable because it's finite, when actually we've never really needed it the whole time. It's just like we haven't had access to the other stuff.
That's wild, man.
It is wild.
And that's a different hole that you're going down through.
Yeah,
like,
it is.
We're talking population control. You said something. Basically, this triggered the idea of just like there's somebody out there stopping us from pretty much evolving. They don't want us to evolve, and that's a huge rabbit hole right there to get into. Maybe we could talk about that in a different video. But who knows? Like we have all these concepts right here ready, and 7.7 billion people is a lot, and it's climbing. And there's no reason we shouldn't be starting on these projects because who knows what's going to happen in the next 10 years, 20 years.
I heard within the past 40 years, past 4 decades, we've wiped out 60% of Earth's wildlife. 40 years, wow. Over half of the life on Earth has been destroyed by fucking people. And yeah, it's grim, but I also, the optimist in me, and I try to see the silver lining in a lot of stuff. I feel like people are more aware to it now than we were back in the day. I feel like there's stricter regulations in some aspects where people are trying to fix it.
We're definitely trying, man. I think every concept that we brought up today would help a lot with the environment. Mm-hmm. It really would.
Yeah, it's important. Like I think that, like we have this like crazy gift of self-awareness. Like we have what a lot of other creatures may or may not have. It's hard to know. Like we can identify problems and we can actively participate in solving them, or we can ignore them and look the other way. We've got so much power and so much potential within these human complicated brains that we have, but we've got to figure out how to use them to like coexist instead of dominate. I think that's one thing about humanity that like because of how advanced we are, we feel like we are like superior, but we have to like cohabitate with everything else. Like we can't exist without nature,
Absolutely, man. Well, let's think. Tomorrow you wake up, it's the year 2050, and you literally can't walk outside without bumping into each other. And somebody said, which concept do you think we should go with to help with this situation on this planet? Which one are you choosing? You can only choose one.
All things. Let's see.
So we had underwater, going to Mars, just living in space, or floating city on water, or floating city above water. They said, Jeremy Branch, you're our man. We're going to go whatever you say. Or stacking cities, too, like the Jetson thing we were talking about.
God, yeah, I would. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. It's so hard to say. I guess what I think the best answer would be is to start heading to Mars.
We're going to start heading to Mars. Yeah. That's your answer.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, get on that ship. We're going to Mars. We're going to populate it. We are the Martians now.
Love it.
Awesome, man.
What about you?
I think I would probably start with honestly, the Jetsons concept, just because I just want to start small, and then I would probably evolve to like the floating on water cities. But I would definitely eventually get to Mars, though. It's it'd probably be my last thing on there, but it's gonna happen. I'm not gonna dismiss it to never. I'm gonna always be trying to get there, honestly. Yeah. And I just don't see why we're not doing. I don't know if we are now, if NASA's planning anything, but I think every concept daily should be trying to get to Mars. And when we get to Mars, let's get to, something else that we can walk and talk on.
Mm-hmm. Like, on the bright side, dude, every day there's going to be a little bit more ocean for us to build cities on top of. So if we just keep going, eventually we'll have just one gigantic ocean we can build cities on top of.
That'd be dope. And then when we overpopulate the ocean, maybe a Kraken will kill us.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds good.
Well, hey, man, what do you guys think? Are you nervous about the future? What would you think? Besides giving me a Hitler answer, what would your solution be to overpopulation? Did you like our ideas, or do you have a hypothesis as well you want to throw in? Let me know in the comments. And thank you again, Jeremy. Check him out over there at People Are Terrible or Movies Are Terrible, or his personal channel, Jeremy Branch.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem, man. And please subscribe and like and share my stuff. Help keep a brother off the streets. Share love, peace, and chicken grease. Jazz hands. That was gay. All right. Peace.